Welcome into this edition of EMAW Radio. Mason Voth from EMAW Online here with you as we get it going on a Wednesday recording. Not much has happened since I talked to you on Monday. If the first thing that you were wondering is, all right, we talked about transfers. What's the deal there? Not really a whole lot of anything other than the fact that Tyler Perry's visit to K-State winding down on this Wednesday. Everything seemingly went according to plan with that. And I still very much expect within the next week, whatever point that ultimately ends up being, Tyler Perry probably is going to end up being a Wildcat. So I don't think that there is much concern about that. K-State's going to have one of those guys checked off the box, and that's going to be good for him because as we see around the rest of the Big 12, other teams are starting to haul dudes in. I mean, West Virginia is the greatest indicator of that. They already got Kirk Kriisa earlier in the cycle. They got Jesse Edwards, the Syracuse transfer. And then just today, they got Raekwon Battle from Montana State, who K-State had played against. And I don't think K-State was heavily pursuing Raekwon Battle. They had reached out to him when he first entered, and that was always a possibility. But I think once that they knew they had Tyler Perry on board, obviously the focus after that is still Max Abmas, even though, I mean, Perry's the likely one that commits first out of those guys. But the main focus is probably still ultimately Max Abmas. I mean, I don't know. The argument could be made that if somebody says, hey, I like Tyler Perry as a better option than Max Abmas, I don't think you're crazy for suggesting that. I mean, Tyler Perry put up amazing numbers in a tougher conference in Conference USA. I mean, he was 17 points a game and shot 41% from three this year. That is really freaking good. Max Abmas, as we know, was at 22 points a game, and he did it in the Summit League, and Abmas shot just 37% from three. Now, there's a lot more volume that comes with Max Abmas. Me personally, I still think Max Abmas is the better player, but Tyler Perry is a guy, like I said, from the get-go, even dating back to last year, he was a dude that I would have always had interest for K-State pursuing in the portal. They got that opportunity to do that this year. So that'll be a nice pickup for K-State when it becomes official, but I still expect that to happen very, very soon for K-State. And then, it's just kind of the waiting game that they play with Max Abmas and kind of wait and see what the move ends up being there and what decision ultimately ends up getting made with him. But K-State at this point in time, a little bit slower in the portal pickups compared to maybe what some other schools have done. And like I mentioned, West Virginia is kind of the poster child right now in the Big 12 for what's going on in terms of their portal work this year. I mean, Kirk Kriisa is there. He's made that transition to West Virginia. And also the other thing to remember is if you go back to the start of the year, Jose Perez is a guy that they picked up from Manhattan College, that is. He transferred to West Virginia. They were trying to see if he could be eligible for this past season. He was not. He was supposed to be the Metro Athletic Conference's or the Mid-Atlantic Conference's player of the year going into the year, but Manhattan, like before the season started, just 4 days beforehand, they fired their head coach and a bunch of their players left. Jose Perez was one of those guys. He transferred to West Virginia, but he was not eligible to play this season, so he will be there for next year. So West Virginia is really starting to stack up and look really good in this. Now, the one thing that I would probably caution people against, because I know that there are definitely some out there that are thinking, man, West Virginia is building kind of a nightmare there. They've done a lot of great things. I think that there is a certain level or a certain type of guy that Bob Huggins has become comfortable with bringing to Morgantown to try and just be good at basketball. And I do think that even though he's got pieces that might all end up working together, I think Bob Huggins has brought in transfers that every single one of those guys thinks that they should be the number one option. Typically, when you transfer, you're looking for a situation that would make you a number one option, give you an elevated role. So I don't know. West Virginia, honestly, to me, it's looking like next year Either this all comes together and they are just as freaking good as we thought, especially offensively, and they are towards the top of the Big 12 the entire year, or it just completely falls apart on them and breaks down, and it's just a absolutely disastrous go of things for Huggins next year. Like, they could still be a tournament team, but there'd probably be turmoil. We'd look at some results, and it's like, you just lost to Oklahoma State by 25 at home and only scored, 35 points because you went 3 of 35 from 3. Like, what the hell happened there? I think that's just as likely as them being a really good team and putting all this great talent to use that they've brought in. So that would probably be the one thing that I would caution people on when it comes to thinking about what's going to take place with Huggins in West Virginia. But definitely impressive that he's been able to get that level of guy to Morgantown multiple times over this cycle. So we'll just have to wait and see kind of how that ultimately ends up playing out. Other notes within the transfer portal. It's been a hot topic of conversation in a lot of different areas, specifically because Deion Sanders is, I don't even know the number now. It's like 20 guys and counting that have left his roster now since their spring game on Saturday. That big successful spring game that took place that we were all supposed to be amazed by and everything, that I was skeptical of on Sunday when I was writing about it. And that was even before all these guys decided they were going to get the heck out of Boulder. And so, yeah, things are going great there. Here's the deal. You don't lose that many guys intentionally, like of Deion telling all of them that they suck and that they should leave. I have no doubt that he probably told that to some guys. But there is also kind of a scenario here where ultimately I think what happened was there were guys that were sticking around and they just decided, hey, you know what? This isn't like the thing for me. I'm out of here. I don't like what's going on here. I don't fit in with what's happening here. And obviously, stylistically, there are definitely going to be some things that don't jive with the Deion Sanders thing and everything else that goes there. There was also, I don't know, there were some other things that came out. David Ubben of The Athletic, he talked to some players that were in the middle of leaving Colorado, and some of the quotes out of it: "Hey, buddy, you're going to get cut today." And then another one, "I'm not sure he knew the names of half the kids he got rid of." So that's great. That is a great deal. That's 23 guys as of this morning that had entered the portal for Colorado. Most of them were kind of directed, hey, get off the team. We don't want you. You stink. At least in Deion's eyes, they stink. Here's the problem. This late in the process, I don't think Colorado is going to be able to find enough guys to really make up for that loss. And, in the grand scheme of things, obviously Deion Sanders has this grand goal and idea of what Colorado football, or it's not really Colorado football. Deion Sanders doesn't care about Colorado football. Deion Sanders cares about Deion Sanders college football. And so that's where he, in the next 2-3 years, this is ultimately probably what he wants. He wants a clean sheet. He wants to be able to fill up a roster however he can. He wants all these open spots to get as much talent as possible. That's great if you had a full cycle in front of you. What he has now is the heaviest transfer portal time of the year is after the season actually ends. That has already passed by. So you're without that. Obviously, if you don't have something locked up as a 2023 high school kid, you're probably not getting something now. So that's out the window. And so this is going to be a pretty thin roster this year for Colorado. And this is going to be a, bold strategy cotton for Deion Sanders. And we'll ultimately see how it ends up playing out for him. But I think this is early evidence that this thing probably isn't going to work out long-term for Deion Sanders. And I think this team is going to be able to have marginal success this year because there is legitimate talent there. They play in a pretty weak conference in the Pac-12. Anything's going to be an upgrade from what they did last year at Colorado. He's going to be able to have some of that mystique. But just because this thing maybe has a couple of seasons where it pops, it's one of those where you should still be cautious and, you're walking. It's like, all right, well, the bridge hasn't collapsed yet, but it still feels really wobbly. It's like those rope bridges, like in Shrek, Shrek and Donkey have to cross the bridge to get to the castle where Princess Fiona is, and ultimately, the dragon. Well, they're walking like, first few steps, whatever, it's fine. And then, but you're still not sure. And then boom, it just falls out from under you and everything kind of goes to crap. Like, that's ultimately how I envision this Deion Sanders thing going. Like, he may have a year where they pop off for 8 or 9 wins, but long term, this thing is not sustainable. And at the very least, in terms of like how Colorado should view it, Deion Sanders is not going to be at Colorado for that long of a period of time. Like, there's no way that Colorado is the pinnacle of where he wants to be. Unless, when bigger places come calling or Florida State ultimately tries to call him home, he tells them to shove it because they didn't want him the first couple of times that he was available. But to me, like, this is because of what my opinion was going into it. This is a lot of confirmation of what I expected to see and how I saw things playing out. So that's ultimately something to kind of come about. Like, I don't know. To me, like, if you didn't see this coming, I don't know, you're probably blind. Like, it was just very evident how this was going to play out. And I think that the Deion supporters are probably going to try and pitch this and swing this as like not a big deal. It's a deal of some kind. I mean, it's maybe not the largest of deals, but it's certainly not anything small or minor. This is a legitimate thing, and this is something that they're going to have to try and figure out and get better about. So we'll ultimately see how things end up playing out for Deion Sanders in Colorado. But that was an interesting note in the transfer portal. And tying that back into K-State, like, I know there has been maybe some thought on, well, should they add anybody in this cycle? Chris Kleiman kind of talked about that last week at his end of the year press conference, where he was just kind of like, yeah, like, it has to be the right fit. It has to check essentially all these boxes for K-State. And I just don't know that they're in that position right now to where they feel like they're set there. If I have it right, I believe it's 84 of the 85 scholarships that are currently in use at K-State, which means that they have just one right now that they could work with. Now, we haven't seen anybody else enter since the spring ended. That could very easily still happen. So we'll have to just kind of watch to see if anything else kind of comes about. So I'm trying to look here real quick to see when the next window. I can't remember when the next window closes off the top of my head, and it's always kind of funky to try and figure it out and see where it is. But essentially, like, there are going to be some guys out there, and maybe K-State still has guys that decide to enter at some point. I don't anticipate that being the case right now, or at least anybody that would, be groundbreaking to leave K-State right now. So it would have to be the right scenario. And right now there's just not a ton of buzz to what K-State needs there. The idea would be they start to address a spot where they think that they need some help, and you go there and you make that happen. I don't really know where that is, because I think that if you look around for next year, there is a lot of things to like for what they bring in. Maybe, honestly, the one spot that I guess I see that could maybe make sense for K-State is if, like, a legitimate, you think this guy can contribute to a Big 12 title contending team right now, if a defensive end fell into their lap in the portal and they said, okay, that guy could fit in here, let's make that happen. In all likelihood, you're not going to find that right now. So I'm not too overly concerned or engaged with what K-State's or the transfer portal in football right now, because I don't think K-State's going to have to be very active in that, because they don't really have the room to be very active in that. But we'll see. Things can always change. It just takes a couple of guys to decide that they want a different opportunity after they've been able to process the end of spring a little bit better. They move on, and then K-State has a few more to work with. And at that point, maybe you can address some areas where you want to add somebody, or you can always just give it away to, a senior or something that doesn't have a scholarship, or however you want to decide to divvy it up. So we'll see how that ultimately ends up going down there. One other thing to keep track of is high school football recruiting, because as we know, and I talked about it a little bit on Monday and around the rest of the way. Like, there's a lot going on there. We're getting ready to head into camp season where some guys will be visiting it by way of doing the camps with K-State and other schools. That's always a big deal. That's how a school like K-State is able to find and evaluate certain guys, get in on them early. Is, they showed up as a sophomore or before their junior year, and you see them and they're like, okay, this is somebody we should keep an eye on. K-State gets in pretty early in the process, and then eventually some of those guys will start to blow up or whatever. But also guys will start to make official visits. And so that will be something to kind of keep an eye on. And we'll ultimately see how that ends up working out. But if you have been monitoring everything that's going on the last couple of days on the site, had an update with the number one player in the state, Michael Boganowski, yesterday. So if you haven't seen that, might be a good time to go get it checked out. Just some updates and thoughts from Kansas's top player, the Junction City athlete. He gave us some updates onto where things sat. Pretty clear defined top three of K-State, Oklahoma, and Michigan, it seems like to me. And ultimately, I think it's probably going to come down to K-State and Oklahoma there. If you look on Rivals right now, we have competing future casts in place over there. I placed one for K-State to land Michael Boganowski probably like a week or two ago, maybe more than that now, just based off the nature of how things have kind of moved along. But also over the weekend, Boganowski took another visit to Norman. He made 2 there this spring. K-State and Oklahoma were the only 2 schools that got multiple visits this spring, to my knowledge, from him, which is at least a significant deal. And he was there for their spring game. The Sooner Scoop, our Rivals Oklahoma site, they got some notes there where they felt pretty good about placing it. Actually, I placed mine for Boganowski on the day that he made his 5th total visit to K-State, the second of the spring, the last one for K-State's final spring practice. And then Josh McQueeston of Sooner Scoop, he put his in the day that Boganowski was down there for the spring game. So there are a lot of things that go into it. Ultimately, at this point in time, like, you don't have to put all of your stock into either of those to see what's happening. I think what that just goes to prove is more so there is a clear top 2 right now inside of that top 3, I think. But there's a defined 2 that are going to battle it out. Ultimately, it's K-State and Oklahoma, and each side can read the tea leaves to see things that they like, see things that they don't like. I do still feel like ultimately at the end of the day, it ends up being K-State, but we'll have to see how things go when he makes his official visits this summer, because he said, after those get made, that like the decision is going to come pretty shortly after that. So, we're talking a timeline similar to, compare it to last year's top player in the state, Avery Johnson. Avery committed early July. Like, we're in that same timeline, I think, for Michael Boganowski, who will probably have a commitment made prior to August of this year. So something to keep an eye on, but just a little bit of an update there. Then on a bigger picture deal, the first big board of 2024, I put in place this week, and it gives you just kind of an idea of who some of the top targets are currently for K-State, and kind of the pecking order in which I see them going. These things are always kind of a combination of, okay, this is a spot and a guy that K-State really wants, but they're also a guy that is obtainable. Like, you have to have that combination, because you can have a guy that is at the top of K-State's wish list, but if he is going to be, more so focused on like Notre Dame or Oregon or whoever you want to throw out there, he's going to have to be lower on that list. Like, the number one want is not always going to be number one on this list, because you have to, I would advise everybody, if you're not living life like this already, be a little bit realistic with it. Like, K-State can offer as many 5 stars as they want and say, hey, this is number one on our list. Good chance that guy is not going to be coming to K-State. So he should not be number one on your list of, all right, priority number 1, let's get this guy. No. Now, it is pretty clear. I already just spent, the last 5 minutes talking about him. Michael Boganowski is the number 1 guy on this list. Rounding out the top 5 includes 3 offensive linemen: Caden Massey, Grant Bricks, Kyle Rakers, and then Devin Jordan, a corner from Oklahoma. He's a 4-star guy. He and Bricks actually are both 4 stars now. I think that's one where like Devin Jordan, he could be higher. The only issue there is based off of interactions and notes that I've gotten, it seems like TCU is probably higher on his pecking order than K-State. So I think if Jordan was, had K-State number 1, there is an argument to be made that he should be in that top 2 or 3. But because K-State has more work to do there, if they want to try and surpass at least one peer school in TCU, they're going to have to do that. So that's kind of just an idea of how it works out. Other notables on there that I think are, should be thrown out. Kennedy Urlacher is on the list. I've moved him down, though. He's pretty low on the list. I actually placed a future cast for him today to go to Notre Dame. Just seems like that's where most of his contact is coming from. And he is a guy that, the son of Brian Urlacher, probably at this stage, like K-State still active in the recruitment, still has a chance, but seems pretty heavily skewed in favor of Notre Dame. That's the only official visit he has set up right now. He may set up others, but Notre Dame is clearly at the very top of that list. It would fit and make sense. So, like, that's another guy on there. But if you want to see the full list, go over to EMAW Online. You can get it checked out. I got notes on a lot of the spots or how some of it ended up working out, and just kind of other notes to remember when it comes to talking about stuff like this, because I think that's important to get taken care of. CJ Brown is a guy that's on the list. CJ Brown is a player out of Arkansas that has been in communication with K-State, has made his visits. He actually already has his official visit for K-State scheduled. He posted that yesterday, so he will be here later on in June. So just something to take note of, and those are a lot of the things that you can go find over on the site right now, and good things to kind of keep track of and see where they end up going. So those are some of the newest things that you can make sure to just stay locked in on, and we'll continue to have more content throughout the week on all of these different things that are going on with K-State and everything else. A couple of other random notes just to kind of throw out there right now. It'll be a shorter version today of EMAW Radio because, like I said, not much has changed since we talked to you on Monday. We'll have a little bit more, and these will get a little bit deeper as the off season progresses. But just a quick little one today. I wanted to note that the Big 12 Golf Championships concluding on this Wednesday. Ludwig Aberg just dominating the field from Texas Tech. He's ranked number 2 in NCAA golf right now. Fantastic. K-State got out to a slow start as a team, but they made a strong push. They're going to finish middle of the pack. They'll get ready. They will make it to an NCAA regional this year as a team, and we'll see where they ultimately end up going there. But it was taking place out at Prairie Dunes, where obviously from my hometown of Hutch, I spent a good chunk of my time in high school working there. Fantastic place, and always fun to be able to see it on a stage like this. And you can actually watch. You could have actually watched it on ESPN Plus. Which there you go again, another little bonus of having ESPN Plus. That's why people shouldn't complain about it as much. Just a little nugget to throw out that way. So those are all the things there to keep track of. And I don't know, not a ton for you today, but at least a little bit to whet your appetite. I know that based off of all of my living experiences in the state, today's episode might just be the perfect get you from work to home afterwards. And if that's how you want to utilize it, that is perfect to me, because I don't know, depending on where you're at, it can be really tough to find good things to listen to on the way home from work. If you're in Manhattan, you probably have good stuff to listen to, like The Game with my man Mitch Fortner. So you can save me for like tomorrow morning or something. But if you're in some places that, that 5 o'clock window is pretty bare and desolate, just flick this on and you'll be good to go, or listen to it whenever you want. But I appreciate it. I'll have more for you guys on Friday with another edition of EMAW Radio. We'll try and get Gabe on for that one, and we'll go into a little bit deeper detail about a bunch of the other topics going on. And as always, if you have any questions or notes that you want to have addressed on the show, leave them in the comments on the YouTube page, or you can always just leave a post in the thread on the EMA Online message board, and we'll get them taken care of and everything. So that'll do it for me today. Appreciate everybody listening. It is, almost 2:15 as I'm finishing this up. So I'm going to get some other work done, have the Royals on in the background because they're playing a day game in Arizona, and probably watch them lose again. So that's a lot of fun. That's how I spend my days, working and just dreading another Royals loss.